Philosophy, at its core, isn't about memorizing dusty theories or parroting ancient names. It's the art of living, the ultimate manual for self-transformation. Carl Jung knew this when he explored individuation as the lifelong process of becoming who we truly are. Practical philosophy invites us to look inward, beyond the endless chatter of the human mind, and instead focus on shaping our inner life. It's about cultivating wisdom, self-awareness, and discipline, not for applause, but because it makes our lives more beautiful and meaningful. Lao Tzu once said, "Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom." That's the heart of it. Now, many get caught up thinking that external skills alone guarantee success. But without a strong connection to one's inner life, those skills are like ornaments on a hollow tree. Pretty, but fragile. Practical philosophy flips that script, urging us to nurture the inner self first, to engage in inner dialogue, and to purify emotions through self-awareness. Spiritual growth becomes the anchor in a world obsessed with outer validation. It's here that reflection, conscience, and the love of wisdom transform theory into a lived art. This inner cultivation isn't about retreating to a cave and abandoning the world, though some find solace in nature, giving back to it as a form of gratitude. No, it's about integrating that inner richness in a daily life, whether negotiating at work, raising children, or engaging in art. Consider the environment's influence. A calm, orderly space can elevate consciousness, while chaos erodes it. Taoism beautifully reminds us that harmony within creates harmony without, connecting self-construction with the very art of living. For example, when one cultivates inner presence through practices like Daikar, meditation, or even morning journaling, they find their external actions become more effective. Decisions are sharper, relationships more authentic, and daily habits more aligned with noble thought. Think about it. Wouldn't you trust someone more who acts with integrity, clarity, and reflection? That's the power of practical philosophy, turning spiritual knowledge into a life technology that upgrades every aspect of human development. And here's the twist. The more someone dives into their inner life, the more their outer life naturally transforms. It's not about forcing change, but embodying it. This subtle art of elevating consciousness through self-programming and sacredness sets the stage for a deeper exploration, one where inner dialogue becomes the compass of discernment and ethical living. Ready to step into that next level? Well, let's talk about it. The principle of inner dialogue and self-conscience. At the core of every spiritually mature individual lies a vibrant inner dialogue, a conversation between the self and the self, fueled by conscience and aimed at wisdom. Carl Jung called this dynamic interplay essential for individuation, where the human mind transcends superficiality and steps into authentic self-awareness. It's not about hearing voices in your head, but about cultivating a personal compass, an internal guardian that keeps you aligned with your values, even when no one's watching. This is how true ethics arise, not from external surveillance, but from the nobility of one's inner life. Most people are conditioned to respond to external rewards or punishments. What society deems acceptable, what teachers command, what parents expect. But what if, instead, we nurtured a human mind so self-aware and committed to personal integrity that no external control would be necessary? That's the power of inner dialogue. Through practical philosophy and sacred stories like the Bhagavad Gita, we learn that Arjuna's battle is not only external but internal. The struggle between duty and desire, fear and responsibility. The battlefield is always within. This internal guardianship can be developed through simple yet profound practices. For instance, setting aside a moment daily for self-reflection, perhaps using questions like, did I act with integrity today? Or did my actions reflect my values? These aren't just abstract ideas. They are concrete tools for shaping the self. Self-construction demands discipline, and discipline, in turn, fosters spiritual growth. Imagine the power of programming your mind with noble thoughts before facing challenging conversations or decisions. It's like wearing invisible armor made of conscience and wisdom. Moreover, fostering this internal dialogue builds resilience against ignorance and superficiality. The more one practices, the more automatic and intuitive noble responses become. Like learning a musical instrument, repetition transforms effort into art. The mind begins to filter out the noise and focus on what truly matters: human values, beauty, and the art of living. This is what practical philosophy is all about: turning everyday experiences into opportunities for reflection, purification, and growth. And here's the real beauty. This inner life becomes the generator of authentic morality, far beyond imposed rules or dogmas. It is through this silent conversation that one discovers their divine nature and commitment to noble thought. But of course, this journey raises an important question. How does one personalize this process of inner development? That's exactly where we're heading next. Personalization of inner development. There's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to inner development. Carl Jung emphasized individuation precisely because each human mind is a unique constellation of archetypes, experiences, and values. What works for one person's self-construction may completely miss the mark for another. That's why practical philosophy isn't about memorizing pre-made recipes, but about experimenting with tools, rituals, and disciplines to discover what truly nurtures your inner life. Self-awareness grows through this trial-and-error process, much like finding the right instrument to play your personal symphony of wisdom. Consider public speaking, for example. Many novices believe that mimicking a seasoned speaker will make them effective. But anyone with discernment can spot a copycat from a mile away. True impact comes from authenticity, from integrating your inner dialogue with your outer expression. The same applies to spiritual growth. Reading Lao Tzu or practicing Daiker might awaken one person, while another resonates more with the poetry of Rumi or the discipline of Zen. The art of living demands that you curate your own toolkit for emotional purification and mental cleansing. That's why it's essential to approach this process with both patience and diplomacy toward oneself. Not every technique will yield immediate results. Some may feel awkward at first, like journaling your inner reflections each night or adopting gratitude rituals every morning. But over time, these practices become part of your human development, enhancing self-respect and fostering a deep admiration for the beauty within and around you. The key is to keep experimenting, adjusting, and refining your practices. This personalization also means learning to recognize when something no longer serves your spiritual growth. Just as nature adapts and evolves, so too must your habits and practices shift as your consciousness elevates. Don't cling to a method simply because it worked once. Instead, remain open to new philosophies, new arts, new disciplines that might resonate more deeply with your evolving self. Practical philosophy is, after all, a living tradition, always dynamic, always responsive. And with that openness comes a profound realization. Wisdom isn't just about accumulating techniques, but about transforming through them. It's a journey of constant self-building, where each practice, each reflection, becomes a stepping stone towards something greater. The journey toward wisdom. Wisdom isn't simply about gathering knowledge. It's about embodying it, living it, allowing it to shape the very fabric of your inner life. Taoism teaches us to see wisdom not as an abstract ideal, but as a living dialogue, a divine conversation whispered through nature, relationships, and even silence. Lao Tzu himself observed that the wise are those who harmonize with the Tao, recognizing their own divine nature reflected in the world around them. This is the ultimate pursuit in practical philosophy, overcoming ignorance through love of wisdom and a commitment to inner dialogue. Carl Jung's work reminds us that wisdom emerges from integrating the shadow, confronting the neglected parts of a human mind and transcending superficial self-constructions. It's about seeing life as a sacred story, like Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, stepping into his role only after profound reflection and internal struggle. The wise person doesn't rush to impose their views, but listens, reflects, and discerns. Wisdom, then, is an art form, a kind of life technology that requires both discipline and humility. One practical way to embark on this journey is through what I call wisdom walks. These are deliberate strolls through nature or city streets where the sole aim is to observe, reflect, and engage in self-awareness. No phones, no distractions, just the mind in conversation with itself and the world. Over time, these walks can become rituals of emotional purification and mental cleansing, allowing you to extract meaning from ordinary experiences and elevate your consciousness through reflection. It's also essential to feed your mind with stories that inspire this journey. Reading sacred texts like the Tao Te Ching, the Bhagavad Gita, or even the dialogues of Plato can awaken dormant parts of your psyche, igniting the inner dialogue that leads to wisdom. Consuming such material with discernment, rather than passively, transforms reading from a pastime into a profound act of spiritual growth. The love of wisdom, after all, is what gives philosophy its soul. And yet, as we deepen this pursuit, another challenge emerges, one that confronts modern individuals relentlessly: the fear of encountering the self. The avoidance of inner reflection is widespread, leading to a life of superficiality and ethical emptiness. Fear of self-encounter and superficiality. It's astonishing how often people flee from the very thing that could transform their lives, themselves. Carl Jung warned that what we resist in our inner life persists, manifesting as projections onto others and creating unnecessary psychological conflict. The human mind, when deprived of self-awareness, gravitates towards superficial distractions, constant entertainment, endless scrolling, shallow conversations, all to avoid facing the deeper truths lurking in the shadow. Yet, without this encounter, individuation and genuine human development remain stunted, leaving a hollow core beneath the facade. This fear of self-encounter breeds dependency on external control. When inner dialogue is weak or non-existent, people outsource their ethics to institutions, trends, or even influencers who dictate what's right or wrong. Without self-construction, conscience becomes malleable, and integrity dissolves into conformity. The result? A society obsessed with appearances, but devoid of spiritual growth or practical philosophy. It's like living in a house with beautiful wallpaper but rotting foundations. Sooner or later, it all collapses. But here's the thing: facing oneself doesn't require a dramatic retreat to the Himalayas or an austere monastic life. It begins in simple, everyday moments, turning off the noise, sitting in silence, and asking, what am I avoiding? Practices such as journaling, meditation, or even reciting sacred phrases like Daiker can help cultivate the courage necessary for this confrontation. Emotional purification and mental cleansing aren't luxuries. They are necessities for anyone seeking wisdom and human maturity. Superficial living, on the other hand, leads to an ethical void. Without anchoring oneself in values, discernment fades, and life becomes a reactive sequence of pleasures and pains. It's easy to become enslaved by trends or overwhelmed by the environment's influence. But practical philosophy reminds us that the art of living is about designing our inner and outer environments to support consciousness elevation and spiritual growth. Beauty, integrity, and reflection must become daily habits. So, where does this avoidance ultimately lead? To a life of discussing people and facts, but never ideas, staying trapped in the mundane rather than rising to engage with the eternal. Discussion levels: people, facts, and ideas. There's an old saying that goes, small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, and great minds discuss ideas. This simple yet profound hierarchy offers a powerful lens for self-awareness and individuation. Carl Jung would likely nod in agreement, knowing how vital it is for the human mind to transcend gossip and surface-level chatter, engaging instead with the archetypes and eternal questions that shape human development. The art of living, after all, is about cultivating conversations that nourish wisdom and practical philosophy. When we limit our discussions to people, we risk reducing life to a series of judgments and comparisons. It's easy to fall into this trap: celebrity gossip, workplace drama, political mudslinging, all of which erode conscience and distract from inner dialogue. Talking about facts or events can be more constructive, yet it often remains rooted in the transient. The wise, however, seek to discuss ideas, concepts like human potential, responsibility, and spiritual growth. These conversations elevate the soul, fostering both individual and collective transformation. One practical step is to intentionally steer conversations towards meaningful topics. The next time you're at dinner or in a meeting, instead of rehashing the latest scandal, pose a question like, "What does success mean to you?" Or, "How do you define integrity?" These prompts invite reflection and open the door to discussing human values, divine nature, and the art of self-construction. They transform ordinary exchanges into moments of shared wisdom and conscience elevation. Moreover, engaging with ideas requires curiosity and discipline, qualities honed through reading sacred texts, studying philosophy, or contemplating nature's account of beauty and responsibility. Just as nature invests in human beings through its generosity, so too must we invest in our inner life by seeking out noble thought and practical philosophy. This is how one builds the discernment necessary to reject vulgar distractions and embrace the sacredness of reflection and wisdom. And yet, even with this intention to elevate our discussions, the question remains: how do we cultivate a consistent inner life that naturally supports these higher conversations? That's where techniques like divine leisures come in, a daily practice of self-alignment and reflection that we'll dive into next. Techniques to foster inner life. Developing an inner life isn't just about deep thoughts or silent meditation. It's about creating daily rituals that anchor your soul to meaning. One of the most powerful tools for this is what we call divine leisures, moments carved out of the day, not for distraction, but for sacred alignment. Carl Jung would say that the unconscious constantly seeks integration, and these pauses become the bridge. Whether it's a cup of tea at dawn, a walk under the stars, or sitting quietly with a passage from the Bhagavad Gita, these micro-moments are where individuation breathes. Instead of rushing from task to task, what if we deliberately extracted the juice from each experience? Imagine pausing after a conversation and asking, "What did I learn about myself?" Or finishing a chapter in a book and reflecting, "How does this idea change me?" This extraction is emotional purification in action. It prevents bitterness from settling into the heart and turns even challenges into catalysts for spiritual growth and self-construction. It's not about having more time. It's about how we meet time. These divine leisures can be enhanced with music and vibration, elements known to elevate consciousness and soothe the human mind. A soft instrumental piece in the morning or a Sufi chant in the evening transforms ordinary space into sacred ground. This subtle use of beauty fosters self-awareness and helps reset the mental programming that's often polluted by stress, noise, and emotional clutter. It's a return to harmony, a dialogue between the outer environment and the inner self. Another technique is intentional silence, a moment where you resist the urge to react or speak and instead observe. This is where the shadow surfaces, not to be feared, but to be understood. The art of living demands this kind of courage. Instead of reacting impulsively, you develop patience and diplomacy, creating space for wisdom to guide action. In time, this builds not just discipline, but admiration for your own ability to live with integrity and balance. And the more you practice these sacred pauses, the more they shape who you are. They become embedded in your identity, reinforcing your commitment to noble thought and human values. But what about the world around you? If your inner life is sacred, shouldn't your outer environment support too? Nature's investment in human responsibility. Nature isn't just a backdrop for human life. It's an active investor, pouring resources, beauty, and energy into our existence. Every breath we take, every tree that shades us, every grain of food we consume is part of this grand investment. Carl Jung's emphasis on the collective unconscious reminds us that our psyche is deeply intertwined with nature's rhythms and archetypes. To live without acknowledging this is to deny part of our own identity. The art of living demands that we recognize this relationship and respond not with entitlement, but with responsibility and gratitude. Human responsibility, then, is about giving back, not as an obligation, but as an act of noble thought and spiritual growth. Practical philosophy teaches that we owe nature more than passive appreciation. We owe it active care. Whether through environmental stewardship, mindful consumption, or creating spaces that reflect beauty and harmony, our actions should align with the human values of respect, responsibility, and integrity. Giving back to nature is, in essence, giving back to ourselves. One practical example of this philosophy is adopting daily habits that reduce harm and increase care. Planting a tree, reducing waste, or even choosing to walk instead of drive. These may seem small, but they reinforce the mental programming of responsibility. They remind us of our place within nature's account and cultivate self-respect and admiration for humanity's potential to live in balance with its environment. Such acts elevate consciousness, turning mundane routines into sacred rituals of giving. Moreover, this recognition of nature's investment transforms how we approach human development. It's not enough to pursue self-construction for personal gain. Our individuation must ripple outward, contributing to collective transformation. By embodying values like honesty, integrity, and beauty, we inspire others to do the same, creating a culture that reveres both the inner life and the outer environment. This is the art of practical philosophy applied to the world stage. But as we reflect on this responsibility, another question naturally arises. How do we maintain the discipline necessary to live in alignment with these elevated ideals? The essence of discipline. Discipline isn't about rigid routines or punishing restrictions. It's about choosing, again and again, to stay aligned with what truly matters. Carl Jung saw the human mind as a battlefield between competing drives, and without discipline, the shadow takes the wheel. But when we cultivate inner strength and spiritual growth, discipline becomes an act of love, of self-respect, of noble commitment, of honoring our divine nature. It's the invisible thread that binds philosophy to daily action, making the art of living not just poetic, but practical. Think of discipline as an inner compass. When temptation to cut corners arises, discipline whispers, "Remember who you are." This isn't about suppressing desire. It's about elevating it, transforming instinct into virtue. For example, choosing to wake up early and begin the day with a sacred ritual, prayer, gratitude journaling, reading Plato, shifts your entire vibrational frequency. It's not just routine. It's a declaration of self-construction and a refusal to let chaos govern your inner life. Discipline also means knowing what to say no to. In a world of endless distraction, it takes maturity to filter out the noise and focus on the signal. That might look like unplugging from digital addictions, saying no to gossip, or choosing solitude over superficial company. These are not acts of denial, but of protection, of your conscience, your clarity, your sacredness. Like a sculptor chiseling away excess stone, discipline carves out the beauty of your higher self. Yet, it's not all grit and grind. Discipline can be joyful when tied to meaning. Setting up a morning playlist that uplifts your spirit, eating meals mindfully, or creating spaces that foster calm and reflection are ways to anchor elevated consciousness in daily life. These habits become life technologies, small, repeatable acts that reinforce spiritual alignment. They program the mind to favor order, harmony, and awareness over reaction, chaos, and ignorance. Still, one can't overlook how profoundly our outer environment influences this process. If discipline is the fire, then your environment is the wind, capable of fanning it into brilliance or snuffing it out entirely. So, how can we design spaces that support this sacred inner work? Life environment as a consciousness shaper. Our environment isn't neutral. It's a sculptor of consciousness, constantly shaping the contours of our inner life. Carl Jung understood that the human mind is porous, absorbing influences from surroundings often without realizing it. That's why practical philosophy urges us to curate our environments with the same care we give to our thoughts. The Sufi aesthetic tradition beautifully embodies this, emphasizing the importance of surrounding oneself with beauty to elevate spiritual growth and self-awareness. Think about it. How different do you feel in a cluttered, chaotic room versus a space filled with light, order, and natural elements? One contracts your spirit, the other expands it. The art of living invites us to design our homes, workspaces, and cities as sanctuaries for the human mind, places that nurture reflection, promote discipline, and inspire noble thought. It's not about luxury. It's about harmony, balance, and responsibility for how the environment influences your psyche. One practical example is creating a sacred corner at home, a small area with items that evoke beauty and meaning. A favorite book like the Bhagavad Gita, a plant symbolizing nature's investment, or a candle to remind you of your divine nature. This space becomes an anchor for daily rituals like meditation or gratitude practice, reinforcing spiritual growth and emotional purification. It serves as a gentle cue for the mind to pause, reflect, and align with elevated consciousness. Beyond personal spaces, how we engage with public environments also matters. Participating in community cleanup projects, supporting urban gardens, or advocating for mindful city planning are all ways of giving back to nature and fostering environments that uplift human development. These acts extend self-respect and admiration for beauty beyond the self, contributing to collective well-being and reinforcing a shared commitment to human values. But even with the most thoughtfully designed environments, there's a crucial element that sets the tone for our inner life: the rituals that bookend our days. How we begin and end each day profoundly impacts our mental programming and spiritual alignment. So, how can we harness these moments for maximum transformation? Morning and night rituals. How you start and end your day acts like mental programming for your entire life trajectory. Carl Jung would agree that these transition points, waking and sleeping, are fertile grounds for shaping the unconscious, embedding values, and fostering self-awareness. Morning and night rituals are not about superstition, but about practical philosophy, intentionally steering your human mind towards reflection, gratitude, and spiritual growth during the moments when it's most malleable and open. Consider beginning your morning with a simple, noble act, perhaps reading a passage from the Tao Te Ching, practicing Daiku, or stepping outside to admire nature's investment in the rising sun. These moments elevate your vibrational frequency, set a tone of self-respect and gratitude, and prime your day for beauty and discipline. Imagine the difference between rushing to your phone versus pausing to breathe deeply and connect with your divine nature. It's transformative. Similarly, ending the day with reflection is an act of emotional purification. Before sleep, you might journal about what noble thoughts guided your actions or review moments when patience and diplomacy prevailed. Music can also play a role: soft, contemplative melodies that induce calm, fostering inner dialogue and preparing the human mind for rest and renewal. These habits reinforce your commitment to self-construction and make bedtime a sacred transition rather than a mindless collapse. Such rituals also serve as a memory of virtue, anchoring your identity in your best self and preventing the infiltration of ignorance or emotional clutter. They are simple, repeatable acts that reinforce spiritual growth and practical philosophy, turning daily life into an art of living. Over time, these practices accumulate, subtly but powerfully reshaping your consciousness and supporting your individuation process. But here's the next challenge. Beyond these personal rituals, how do we gather and safeguard the most profound moments of our lives, using them as tools for resilience and transformation? Sacred collection of life moments. Life is filled with sacred moments, glimpses of beauty, acts of courage, flashes of wisdom, that often pass unnoticed if we're not paying attention. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of integrating such experiences into the self, transforming them into sources of strength and resilience. By consciously curating these moments, we create a spiritual first aid kit, a reservoir of virtue, meaning, and self-respect to draw upon when life's inevitable challenges arise. This collection becomes a cornerstone of practical philosophy and human development. Imagine recalling a time when you acted with extraordinary patience or showed kindness to someone in need. These are not mere memories. They are proof of your divine nature and human potential. Writing them down, reflecting on them, or even sharing them as sacred stories can reinforce your self-construction, strengthening your commitment to noble thought and spiritual growth. It's like carrying an invisible shield of inner dialogue and conscience wherever you go. One practical approach is to create a virtue journal. Each evening, note one act, however small, that aligned with your values, a moment of restraint, a choice of honesty, or an instance of giving back to nature. Over time, this journal becomes more than a record. It's a mirror reflecting your journey toward individuation and self-awareness. It also acts as a counterweight against the mind's tendency to fixate on failures or dwell in ignorance and self-doubt. Moreover, this collection can be a source of inspiration for others. Sharing these sacred stories, much like Hanuman's inscribed devotion in the Ramayana, encourages collective transformation and reinforces the art of living within your community. They remind us that while our environment influences us, we also shape it through the values and energy we project into the world. This is how we give back, not only to nature but to humanity itself. And yet, as we cultivate this internal archive of noble acts, there's another crucial skill to master: learning to instinctively reject the vulgar and coarse, ensuring that our mental programming remains elevated and unpolluted. So, how can we fine-tune our taste and instinct for the sacred over the profane? Learning to reject the vulgar. Cultivating an elevated inner life isn't just about embracing the noble. It's equally about learning to instinctively reject the vulgar and the coarse. Carl Jung understood that what we allow into the human mind shapes our psyche, often in unconscious ways. Without discernment, we risk allowing mental pollution to corrode our self-awareness, undermining both spiritual growth and individuation. Practical philosophy, therefore, teaches the art of refining one's taste, developing an almost automatic aversion to what degrades rather than uplifts. This process of mental programming starts with conscious choices. For example, instead of consuming media that glorifies violence, superficiality, or ignorance, we can intentionally surround ourselves with beauty, wisdom, and art that inspire reflection and self-construction. Listening to music that elevates, reading sacred texts, or engaging with nature's account of harmony subtly, but powerfully conditions the mind to favor noble thought over vulgar distraction. Over time, these choices become habits, and habits crystallize into character. It's much like cultivating a palate for fine food. At first, you may not notice the difference between processed and wholesome, but with practice, your body begins to crave what is pure and nourishing. The same is true for the mind. By repeatedly choosing content and environments that align with your divine nature and human values, You develop a refined inner compass, one that instinctively rejects what's beneath you and seeks what enhances your self-respect and admiration for life. One practical strategy is to perform a weekly mental audit. Reflect on the influences you've allowed into your life, conversations, media, habits, and ask, is this elevating my consciousness or dragging it down? This simple act of self-awareness reinforces your commitment to the art of living and ensures that your environment and inner dialogue remain aligned with your highest ideals. It's an ongoing act of self-programming, protecting your spiritual integrity and human development. But rejecting the vulgar isn't just about avoiding negativity. It's about actively committing to noble ideals that shape who you are becoming. So how do we make this commitment real, embedding it deeply into our daily lives and rituals? Commitment to noble ideals. Commitment to noble ideals is not merely a lofty aspiration. It's a daily practice, a choice we make again and again to align our actions with our highest values. Carl Jung emphasized that individuation requires the conscious integration of ideals into the self, shaping not just thought, but behavior. This isn't about perfection. It's about sincerity and persistence in the art of living. Spiritual growth demands that we anchor our commitments through practical rituals that remind us of who we aspire to become. One simple but profound technique is the mental repetition of noble commitments during key daily moments, such as meals. Imagine pausing before eating to affirm silently, I commit to patience, to kindness, to wisdom. These affirmations, repeated with intention, act as seeds planted in the fertile soil of the unconscious, slowly reshaping the human mind's default programming. Over time, these micro-moments of reflection become part of your identity, strengthening self-awareness and integrity. Another practical approach is to create visual cues in your environment. Phrases on your wall, symbols on your desk, that serve as constant reminders of your commitments. A framed quote from the Bhagavad Gita or an image representing nature's investment can reinforce your daily resolve. This isn't about decoration. It's about mental programming, ensuring that noble thought remains at the forefront of your consciousness, guiding your decisions and behaviors even when distractions abound. Moreover, sharing your commitments with trusted friends or a community can deepen your accountability. Discussing your dedication to human values like honesty, responsibility, or giving back to nature not only reinforces your own resolve, but inspires others to embark on their own journey of self-construction. This collective reinforcement transforms personal commitment into a shared cultural ethos, magnifying its impact and fostering collective human development. And as you embed these commitments into your life, you begin to notice something remarkable. Beauty and contrast take on new significance, becoming tools for awakening and intensifying consciousness. But how exactly can we harness these natural contrasts, like dawn and twilight, to further elevate our inner life? Use of beauty and contrast for awakening. Beauty and contrast are among the most powerful tools for awakening consciousness and intensifying self-awareness. Carl Jung noted that symbols and archetypes often emerge through contrast, capturing the human mind's attention and inviting reflection. Practical philosophy teaches us to intentionally engage with these contrasts, like dawn and twilight, as moments to pause, recalibrate, and deepen our inner dialogue. These transitions, woven into nature's account, mirror the beginnings and endings within our own lives, offering a sacred rhythm to guide our spiritual growth. Think about the sunrise, a perfect moment of emergence, of moving from darkness to light, mirroring your own journey of self-construction. By synchronizing beauty, music, and reflection during these times, you elevate ordinary experiences into sacred rituals. For example, listening to a contemplative melody as you watch the sky change at dusk transforms a simple act into an intentional moment of spiritual alignment and emotional purification. It's practical philosophy expressed through daily life. Contrast also sharpens discernment. Experiencing both serenity and chaos helps the human mind recognize what nurtures versus what depletes. This awareness fuels the commitment to noble thought, encouraging you to design your environment and daily habits in ways that consistently support your individuation and discipline. Nature, in all its beauty and variation, offers endless opportunities to practice this, observing the cycle of seasons, listening to the shift from silence to birdsong, or noting how different spaces influence your mood. Moreover, beauty isn't just external, it's a reflection of the inner life. When you cultivate inner harmony through self-awareness and practical philosophy, your perception of beauty expands. What once seemed mundane becomes profound, and you develop a heightened sensitivity to the sacredness embedded in everyday life. This transformation not only enriches your own experience, but also enhances your ability to give back to nature and contribute meaningfully to human development. But beauty and contrast alone aren't enough. They must be anchored by intentional mental programming to sustain elevated consciousness. This is where practices like Daikar come in, acting as continuous background music for the soul, reinforcing your alignment and protecting against the infiltration of negativity. So, how do we effectively integrate such mental programming into our daily lives? Daikar and mental programming. Daikar, the sacred act of remembrance, serves as one of the most effective tools for mental programming, keeping noble images, ideas, and melodies playing in the background of the human mind. Carl Jung highlighted how repetition shapes the unconscious, forming deep grooves in our psyche that influence behavior and self-awareness. By deliberately choosing what we repeat, we elevate our consciousness and foster spiritual growth, embedding the art of living into the very fabric of our inner life. Consider integrating Daikar-like practices throughout your day, quietly repeating affirmations of patience, compassion, or wisdom while commuting, cooking, or walking. These simple acts transform mundane moments into sacred ones, reinforcing your commitment to noble thought and human values. It's practical philosophy in motion, turning everyday routines into opportunities for emotional purification and self-construction. Over time, these repetitions become second nature, guiding your responses even in challenging situations. Mental programming also requires vigilance against infiltration by negative influences. Without continuous reinforcement of sacredness and beauty, the human mind can easily be swayed by vulgar distractions or destructive patterns. Creating playlists of uplifting music, curating inspiring imagery in your environment, or regularly reading from sacred texts like the Bhagavad Gita can serve as anchors, ensuring that your mental space remains aligned with your divine nature and human potential. Moreover, integrating Daikar into your life isn't about rigidity, it's about rhythm. Like a favorite song that keeps playing softly in the background, it should be woven seamlessly into your daily existence, enhancing rather than interrupting your flow. This practice of continuous remembrance elevates your vibrational frequency, deepens your self-awareness, and strengthens your individuation, turning your inner life into a wellspring of wisdom and resilience. Yet, as we cultivate this inner programming, we must also be mindful of the external content we consume, books, movies, stories, that subtly shape our perceptions and beliefs. So how can we ensure that what we absorb from the world nourishes our soul rather than pollutes it? Books, movies, and reflection. The content we consume, books, movies, stories, is far more than entertainment. It's nourishment for the human mind and a powerful force in shaping self-awareness and spiritual growth. Carl Jung understood that narratives tap directly into the collective unconscious, influencing our archetypes, our shadow, and even our individuation. Practical philosophy urges us to approach this content consciously, treating each encounter with art as an opportunity for reflection, wisdom, and emotional purification. Rather than passively absorbing whatever media is trending, We can intentionally curate our intake to align with our commitment to noble thought and human development. Choosing to read works like the Tao Te Ching, the Bhagavad Gita, or even modern reflections on the art of living elevates our mental programming, reinforcing discipline and discernment. Similarly, watching films that explore themes of transformation, responsibility, and integrity can inspire self-construction and foster admiration for human potential. But it's not just about the selection, it's about the engagement. After reading a book or watching a film, take a moment to ask, what did this awaken in me? How does this shape my practical philosophy? This reflection transforms consumption into active dialogue, turning every story into a mirror of your inner life. It's a practice of extracting the essence, the juice, from experiences rather than passively allowing them to fade into memory. Additionally, discussing these reflections with others can deepen the impact. Sharing insights from a sacred story or debating philosophical themes over coffee enriches your inner dialogue and strengthens your commitment to human values. It becomes an act of giving back to nature and humanity, fostering collective transformation through shared wisdom. These conversations elevate your environment and contribute to a culture of conscience, beauty, and responsibility. Yet, even as we refine our media consumption, there are ancient stories that offer timeless lessons on how to inscribe divine values into our very being. One such story is that of Hanuman, a tale of devotion, strength, and self-construction that reveals how sacred storytelling can shape our inner life. So, how can we internalize such stories in a way that transforms who we are? Sacred storytelling, Hanuman and the inner inscription. The story of Hanuman, the devoted servant in the Ramayana, is a powerful metaphor for inscribing divine values into one's very being. Carl Jung would interpret Hanuman's unwavering devotion as an archetypal force within the human mind, the hero archetype in service to something greater than the ego. Sacred storytelling like this serves not merely to entertain, but to guide our individuation and spiritual growth. By internalizing such narratives, we construct an inner life rich with meaning, resilience, and noble commitment. Hanuman's tale teaches us about the transformative power of inscribing virtues deeply within ourselves, just as he inscribed Rama's name into his heart. Practical philosophy urges us to do the same, to consciously engrave values like courage, discipline, and love of wisdom onto the core of our identity. This inner inscription isn't a one-time event. It's a lifelong process of self-construction, reinforced through reflection, daily habits, and sacred rituals that remind us of who we truly are. One practical way to embody this is to create personal mantras or affirmations derived from sacred stories that resonate with you. For example, reciting phrases like, "I serve with integrity," or "I act with compassion," throughout the day, especially during moments of challenge, reinforces this internal programming. Over time, these inscriptions become part of your unconscious operating system, guiding your behavior with the same steadfastness that Hanuman demonstrated in his devotion. Moreover, sharing sacred stories with others, whether through teaching, parenting, or community engagement, magnifies their transformative power. It becomes a form of giving back to nature and humanity, ensuring that these timeless lessons continue to inspire new generations. Storytelling thus becomes not only a means of personal individuation, but also a vehicle for collective human development and spiritual evolution. Yet, as we integrate these sacred inscriptions into our being, we must also learn the delicate art of delivering truth with both patience and justice. How do we balance the need for honesty with the wisdom to know when and how to speak? Patience and justice in delivering truth. Delivering truth is an art that requires both patience and justice, not just raw honesty. Carl Jung understood that timing and diplomacy are essential when confronting the human mind's defenses and shadows. Without discernment, truth can become a weapon that wounds rather than heals. Practical philosophy teaches that truth, when wielded with wisdom, becomes a tool for transformation, contributing to spiritual growth and human development rather than triggering resistance or harm. Imagine you've recognized a difficult truth about a loved one's behavior or your own patterns of ignorance. The immediate impulse might be to confront directly, but wisdom advises pause. Patience allows the space to assess not just the accuracy of the truth, but also the readiness of the other, or even yourself, to receive it. Practicing this restraint is part of the art of living, an application of self-awareness and emotional purification that deepens your individuation. A practical approach is to ask reflective questions before speaking. Is this the right moment? Will this serve their growth or my ego? This mindfulness ensures that your delivery aligns with noble thought and human values, fostering integrity and self-respect. It transforms difficult conversations into opportunities for constructive engagement rather than sources of division. This is the kind of diplomacy that elevates personal relationships and contributes to collective transformation. Moreover, knowing your limits is essential. Not every truth must be spoken, and not every battle must be fought. Recognizing when silence is more powerful than speech is a mark of spiritual maturity. This discernment is nurtured through daily reflection, environmental influence, and continuous commitment to practical philosophy. It's about mastering the art of delivering truth with grace, ensuring that your words are instruments of beauty and responsibility rather than blunt tools of self-assertion. And yet, the ability to deliver truth wisely ultimately rests on a foundation of integrity, individuality, and self-respect. Without these, all efforts at noble dialogue falter. So, how do we cultivate these core qualities and ensure that our inner life remains unified and resilient? Integrity, individuality, and self-respect. Integrity is the linchpin that holds together our meaning of life and our daily actions. Carl Jung emphasized that without alignment between who we are and how we act, we experience an internal fracture, a split that erodes self-respect and undermines individuation. Practical philosophy teaches that integrity isn't just about honesty in the external sense. It's about coherence within, ensuring that the human mind's values and behaviors are in harmony, creating a stable foundation for spiritual growth and human development. This internal unification cultivates individuality, the courage to live according to your own conscience, rather than blindly following external expectations. In a world saturated with trends and collective projections, maintaining individuality requires discipline and discernment. For example, choosing a career path that aligns with your inner calling, even when it defies societal norms, is a profound act of self-construction and respect for your divine nature. It's how we build authentic human potential. Self-respect naturally flows from this alignment. When you consistently act according to your values, you foster admiration for yourself, reinforcing your commitment to noble thought and practical philosophy. This feedback loop strengthens your emotional resilience and your capacity for giving back to nature and humanity. Conversely, when actions betray values, the fracture deepens, leading to confusion, diminished self-awareness, and a disconnection from the art of living. A practical exercise to cultivate integrity is the practice of daily alignment checks. Asking yourself, did my actions today reflect who I truly am? Over time, this reflection fosters consciousness elevation and solidifies the habit of living with integrity. It transforms life into a continuous process of self-programming and individuation, ensuring that your inner dialogue remains clear and your identity grounded in human values and spiritual growth. But how does this integrity influence the way we nurture the next generation, especially when environment plays such a significant role in shaping character? How do we support children and others to transcend their circumstances and commit to their own individuation? Raising children and maturity of the soul. Raising children is one of the most profound expressions of human responsibility and an opportunity to foster the maturity of the soul. Carl Jung noted that while the environment influences a child's development, it does not fully determine their destiny. Individuation is ultimately an inner journey. Practical philosophy teaches that while we must provide supportive environments that nurture human values, we must also encourage children to engage in their own process of self-construction, cultivating discernment, integrity, and spiritual growth. Consider the stories of individuals who transcended harsh conditions, figures like Viktor Frankl or Nelson Mandela, who, despite oppressive environments, chose noble thought and transformed society. These examples remind us that while the environment is influential, it is not absolute. Teaching children the art of inner dialogue, emotional purification, and self-awareness equips them with the tools to transcend their circumstances and commit to their own human development. One practical approach is to model the values you wish to instill, demonstrating integrity, practicing discipline, and giving back to nature. Children learn not just through instruction, but through observation of how adults live the art of living. Creating family rituals around gratitude, storytelling, or reflection fosters an environment where self-awareness and spiritual growth are natural parts of daily life, reinforcing their importance through lived experience. Moreover, supporting children means encouraging their individuality, recognizing that each soul has its own path of individuation. Instead of imposing rigid expectations, we can offer guidance and space for exploration, allowing them to discover their own unique alignment with human values and practical philosophy. This approach nurtures self-respect, inner dialogue, and the courage to act with integrity even in the face of societal pressures. And ultimately, this practice of nurturing the next generation reflects the greater task that nature has entrusted to humanity, not merely to advance technology, but to cultivate better human beings. So, what is humanity's true task in the grand scheme of nature's investment? Our spiritual landscapes. Nature's true expectation of humanity isn't technological domination or relentless consumption. It's the cultivation of better human beings. Carl Jung's vision of individuation aligns perfectly with this. The evolution of the human mind towards greater self-awareness, integrity, and spiritual growth. Practical philosophy reveals that our ultimate responsibility is to realize our inner potential and contribute to the collective elevation of human development. The art of living is, therefore, not about what we can extract from life, but about what we can give back. Each of us is an investment made by nature, a unique manifestation of its creative force with a capacity for wisdom, beauty, and noble thought. This investment comes with a moral obligation to engage in self-construction and emotional purification, ensuring that we are not passive recipients of life, but active participants in its ongoing refinement. Our role is to transform not only ourselves, but also the environment and society through conscious, responsible action. One practical way to honor this task is through consistent acts of giving back, mentoring others, participating in community service, or contributing to environmental stewardship. These actions extend our individuation beyond personal gain and into collective transformation. They reflect an understanding that human values like responsibility, self-respect, and admiration for beauty must transcend individual lives to shape the world we all share. Moreover, embracing humanity's true task means committing to continuous self-programming, ensuring that our mental, emotional, and spiritual landscapes remain fertile grounds for growth. It means engaging in reflection, practicing discipline, and nurturing an inner dialogue that constantly seeks alignment with the divine nature within. This commitment anchors us in the art of living, turning each day into an opportunity to give back and grow. And so, as we stand at the threshold of this realization, we're left with a compelling question. How do we now take all this wisdom and put it into practice, transforming not just our inner life, but the collective destiny of humanity? That's the living challenge before us. So now the question is, will you dare to live consciously, or will you keep letting your environment and unconscious programming dictate your path? Everything you've learned here, the art of inner dialogue, the power of mental programming, the commitment to noble ideals, is useless unless you act on it. The human mind is a garden. It will either grow weeds or cultivate wisdom, depending on your daily choices. Which will you choose? Are you ready to turn practical philosophy into your life's compass? Imagine waking up every day with clarity, discipline, and deep self-respect, knowing that your actions reflect your highest values. Picture a life where your environment supports your spiritual growth, where your habits reinforce your individuation, and where your relationships thrive on integrity and mutual admiration. This isn't just a fantasy, it's a possibility within your reach. If you begin applying these principles today, what's stopping you? Fear, laziness, or the belief that you're not ready? Let me tell you, you are. If this message resonated with you, then it's time to take the next step. Subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and join this community of seekers who are committed to mastering the art of living. Share your reflections in the comments. What's the first practice you're going to implement from everything you've learned here? Let's keep this dialogue alive. Your transformation begins now. Are you ready?